Okay, welcome to the Soul Wisdom Exchange. I'm Regina Curtis, owner and founder of At Matry. I'm a soul wisdom mentor and a soul sourced business strategist. And I love having conversations with soul guided entrepreneurs who are out there in the world sharing their gifts and doing work in from the heart, right? From their ways of knowing and being. And so today on the show, I have Nicole. And Nicole, I'd love to have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and the work that you do.
Sure. Hi. So my name's Nicole. My name's Nicole Spiegel-Gotsch. I'm the CEO and founder of Maven. We help women uh, build, launch, and grow their businesses by mastering their marketing. The way I came to this has been sort of a twisty path. I was an in-house designer for 7.5 years. Prior to that, I got my start with a new media nonprofit. After, somewhere in between, I had my own one-woman creative shop for 13 years. And I recently shifted focus to do marketing strategy consulting for women business owners, largely because we're very marginalized uh, and underserved in many ways. So, we could talk more about that at some point if you want, but that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I love it. So, um, tell us a little bit about. We were just having a conversation. We had like a 2 hour conversation in 15 minutes, like just before we got on the live broadcast. So I feel like we're going to just expand upon some of those themes. But I would love to hear a little bit more about. You were just sharing with me your ways of knowing and being, and I would love for you to share those again.
So thank you. Yeah, I was talking with Regina about this because I was contemplating it before, literally minutes before we hopped on, and I hadn't really given it as much thought as I probably should have.
No, you
And
gave it as much thought as it was perfect, right? Like I love those in the moment. Just let it flow out.
but what came to me was really compassion, sort of leading and interacting from a place of compassion and being organic in terms of my process and the way I work with people, and that leaves things open for a certain amount of fluidity and adaptability that I think is really important, especially for entrepreneurs, because things are changing rapidly. If you have something that's too prescribed,
Yes.
it's really easy to just get into this mode of almost self-flagellation, like, it's not going on schedule, or it's not right, or it's not X, Y, or Z. Whereas if you're coming at it from this place of sort of, more organic and with some compassion and movement, right, and allowing for the ups and downs that are going to happen, or the shifts and changes, you're going to have a better ride, in my in my opinion. Right, you're going to have a better ride, and you're going to be able to adapt to what's happening with your business, right? Like, if you stay stuck, like if a person stays stuck on what they envisioned, let's say something that's clearly not working, it's not working for them as the business owner, and it's not yielding them results in the actual business itself,
Mhm.
then what's the point? Right? Like, what's the point of holding on to that? It's clearly something that you have to let go of, and just, okay, we're going to shift gears, you know. So
I
yeah,
love it.
that's
So a couple things were coming in when you were talking about that because you said, that you serve female entrepreneurs in with their marketing and branding or marketing and messaging. What did you say?
marketing strategy, but also business development. It can include branding, sort of a whole kit and caboodle.
The whole, right. Marketing is one of those areas that's like uh it really has roots and uh, moves through all areas of your business, right? Like it really is both the internal, like you're bringing people in through that, but you're also sharing out through it. It's like the conduit, and so it's always interesting to me how people approach marketing because marketing, and I've had my fair share of experience in the corporate space with marketing, both through working with teams and then also being in the role of having to to be the marketing team as a part of a one-woman show. And it is tied into every single part of your business. So to take it and just put it into a bubble and be like, this is marketing, right? Like that is so destructive. Um,
Mhm.
it really is not helpful to anything, because when that happens, and I've had experiences in kind of larger corporate spaces where it's like, I was told that's not your deal. I was creating, so you said, product development or project development. I was in product development, so I was responsible for creating these programs and in a lot of cases running them, but I wasn't responsible for marketing them, and instead was actually told, just share your content, share out, this is what the program is, and let the marketing team do their thing. But there was this disconnect, right? And I would look at it and I'd be like, that's not what it is at all. But then I would be responsible for running a program to the expectations of what was marketed, and it was no longer the program that I created.
Yeah, I mean, I think you really hit on it. I have this expression that I always use: marketing doesn't exist in a vacuum. Uh,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and it shouldn't either. I mean, you usually see this dichotomy with sales and marketing. Like, there's always this idea, like, the farmer and the rancher, can be friends. Like,
Yeah.
there doesn't have to be this sort of knocking heads relationship. And the same thing with product or any other part of the business. Ideally, you want integration. You want dialogue between the different pieces of the business. And that can even be tricky if you're a business owner, like a solo business owner, because maybe your brain or your experience is drawn more strongly or more in tune with one area of your business than another, right? So that can make it really easy to just want to put the other one aside and not pay too much attention to it. um,
I've been guilty of that myself, right? Like absolutely. I am a I have a background in education, right? So I've got the whole, like, the curriculum, the why piece of it.
Mhm,
I've spent a lot of time in operations, so I have the very like tactical, this is how we do it.
mhm,
And even though I've danced with marketing and messaging and all of that for years, I do struggle in that area, probably a lot because I've been told for decades that that's not my responsibility. It's not my area of expertise. I'm supposed to leave that to somebody else. And when I go into those spaces, I end up coming into them very much from the technical standpoint of like, this is what you're going to do and this is what you're going to learn. But it doesn't have that kind of magical touch of, this is how someone's going to receive it. And so I can say, like, as a solo entrepreneur, that has been definitely a place where I've struggled, because it is not what I've been celebrated for before. And I've always been told to just like push it away. And so what do I do subconsciously? I just push it away. Does that serve me? Hell no.
well, but it's really natural. And I think the other thing too is that when we are in corporate environment, right, the stakes are much higher in a way. They've already have, whatever company it is, they probably already have a very long standing, the brand's established, the
Mhm.
market's been identified, the budget behind it is a certain dollar figure. I think a lot of times we forget that as solopreneurs, we have a huge, nobody thinks of it as a luxury, but it is. If you're right, like if you're doing what I call low or no cost channels, right? Your email, your social media, you have the freedom to experiment. It's
Yes.
not, I mean, it is costing you time and energy, and you could make a misstep, but
But
you
here's the
you
thing,
have a
right?
lot of latitude, you
You
know?
do. You do. And this is something that I talk about a lot as well with, okay, so I've seen both sides of this, right? I've seen it from the inside and I've seen it from the outside. And in a corporate space, now one of my like specialty now is people who are moving from one space into the other and working with those
Mhm.
people. So I've seen it in myself and I've seen it in a lot of other people. But the myth, there's so many myths out there, and it's not that we're being told these myths, it's that we've lived them. And Now we get into the space of entrepreneurship and we think, oh, okay, well, research and development needs to happen where you're, you go to market with this product that you've already tested, right?
Mhm.
But like you said, there's a luxury as an entrepreneur to be able to test these things out, but there's a luxury in a corporate space to be able to take that process, put it somewhere else in another room with a group of people. There's money behind it. There's all these things, and often as the consumer, right, the person who's receiving that product, we don't see any of that process because it happens in a research and development lab or in an office or a team
Mhm.
or whatever, where there's all this testing and iterations and things like
Mhm.
that that are happening, so that when it's launched by whatever, in whatever way it's launched to the public, it's already known that it's going to be successful. It's already known that it's going to be profitable. And so then as we sit in our internal world of being the CEO of our own business, right? Or whatever term you use for it, owner, founder, creator, etc., you are doing that research and development in
Mhm.
every single thing you do, every thought you have, every action you take, every
Mhm.
program you present, right? You're doing
Mhm.
that as an integrated part of everything you do. And so that means that you're always in the planning stage, the you know follow up, right? You're always looking at what has happened before, how do I improve this? And it can feel really exhausting and it can feel like you're doing everything wrong because you're always in that state of research and development.
I think you're totally right. It's a trade-off. I've gone back in house for brief stints during my career, like 1 year contract kind of thing, and a lot of the reasons were exactly what you're describing. To have the internal resources, to be part of a team, because I love having a team.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost the antithesis of like this lone wolf entrepreneur idea. I like having a team. I think some of the best ideas get baked as with a room of different people weighing in on it. Um, so it's definitely a trade-off, which is
But does it have to be?
I
Here-
I don't think it has to be, right? Like, it's only a trade-off if you think of it strictly in those terms.
Yeah.
So, for example, you can always create your own board of, your own advisory board, right? You can have people who are almost your internal review committee for things. A lot of times, these will be like close friends or colleagues you really respect. If you're in the startup level where you're really doing something big and you're going to demand a lot of their time, that might mean equity or pay or having paid board members. So I don't want to
Yeah.
put it out there that you're going to get a whole bunch of people to work for you for free, because that their time and expertise has
Yeah.
value too. But you can source. I don't know if crowdsource is the right word. Community source actually is what I
Community.
prefer.
So yeah, that's where I'm going. So this is what I see as the future of business as an entrepreneurship, and I think that ultimately corporate spaces are going to benefit from the spiritual, soul-based, soul-guided, whatever you want to call it, entrepreneurs like you and I, like the people that we're working with, who are doing this right now, because we're taking it from that space of everything is black and white, right? It's this or that. It's either in-house or out of house. And we're taking it into this space where we're getting a little bit messy with it, right? Like,
Mhm.
and it feels messy because it's different. And so one of the biggest things that I see as an important element of having a sustainable work life ecosystem is having a community to support you, because it's not um, let me do it this way. If you look at the corporate space, there's absolutely a community there supporting it, right? You
Mhm.
have the difference, though, is that the life force energy of that business is everything is there to support the business.
Mhm.
So you've got employees who are coming in to do the work to keep it running, right? You've got partners who are providing different elements that is not your
Mhm.
wheelhouse, right? So you've got your
Mhm.
wheelhouse, and then you bring in partners who are doing other things. Why can't we do that as entrepreneurs, right? There's this myth again that you go into entrepreneurship to do things for yourself because you see a different way, or you need something different in your schedule. But who said you had to do it by yourself?
That's one of my, you hit on two things that are sort of my favorite. One, just because you can do it on your own doesn't mean you should,
Yes.
right? So I've met a lot of people that are like, oh, I know, even I've been guilty of this. Oh, I could just design that, or oh, I
Me
could just
too.
write this up. And it's like, yeah, I could, but where's my
Right.
time best spent today? Because I don't want to work 20-hour days. That's
Yep.
not how I want to shape my life.
Right.
And is that the best use of my time for my business?
Right.
So that's the one thing. And the other thing was I was talking to some students last week about this, so similar kind of topic.
Hmm.
And actually, it was about entrepreneurship, just in general. And they asked for a piece of advice. What piece of advice? And everyone on the panel went around, and I said, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. For me,
Yes.
that's the biggest. But I'm going for anyone who's watching out there. This is terrifying for me. Being on a camera live and doing anything is terrifying. I was the kid who hid behind a couch when my mom pulled out the camera. I do not like being but get comfortable with being uncomfortable. This is part of connecting with people, with that community that I want to reach and interact with. So that means having to sort of get over a little bit of my discomfort and learn to roll with it, right? Maybe I'm going to say the wrong thing. Maybe I'm not going to be as polished as I want to be. And that's not just in this instance. This could also be in terms of my first website design. You could say
Mhm.
that. My first email might not be perfect that I send out to my list. Whatever it is, the first, second, or even third one,
Yeah. And
you know?
big surprise, you're going to continue changing it all the time. So there really is no perfection, right? Like, you can get stuck in that analysis paralysis. You can get stuck in that cycle of like wanting to do things perfectly. And you're never going to hit that mark, right? You might hit it for whatever feels perfect in that moment. And then you look back 2 weeks later or 2 years later and go, I'm not that person anymore. I'm not doing that anymore. It's no longer perfect, right? So it's a fleeting thing, even if it does kind of hit that resonant chord. So what can you do that is the best you can do right now? And how do you show up in that really, you know, authentic way where you're there to be who you are and still be growing, right? Still be evolving.
Yeah, and I think, it's 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 like everything. You're trying to balance, you know, the balance between making the business I mean, a lot of it goes back to what your goals for your business are and how you want it to evolve. I think of it as, the difference between maybe a subsistence farming versus, corporate farm. Like, what
Yeah.
what do you are you growing a victory garden, or are you growing, like, what is it you want your business to do? How is it you want it to? How fast do you want that to happen? All those
And
kinds of
why?
questions, and why, right? Why is it important to you? And when you sort of get your footing from that starting place, that foundational place, it makes it a little bit easier every time you find yourself getting caught up in a flurry. Just take a breath and be like, okay, why am I doing this again? What's important right now?
Hmm.
Is this serving me? Is this serving the business? Are these two things in conflict? Because then you might have a problem. Maybe your idea for your business is really in conflict with what you need for your life. And that sounds crazy, but it's totally
No, it doesn't sound crazy. It sounds
you
so
know?
true, right?
So,
Sorry,
and
I cut you off
yeah,
your
no,
train
like,
of
I feel like I just had an epiphany. Like, because it happened to me. Actually, my prior business, that definitely happened to me. I had a revenue target I wanted to hit, and I was getting traction working 7 days a week. And physically and mentally, I was younger, all full of piss and vinegar. I thought that was fine. My husband, however, did not think that was fine. And my health eventually didn't think it was fine either.
right.
So with this business, I've tried to really incorporate and remind myself of what I learned the first time around and what to watch out for, and that sometimes, I got to make decisions, right? Like,
Yeah,
and also adjust, right? Like, is there another way? Is there a different way to meet my goal that will still work well for me and the other parts of my life? And that's where the real creativity comes in. Because
yes,
everybody and their mother has an idea to do, anyone can just churn out the hours and grind.
right.
But to make all the pieces fit and work together, that's a whole nother layer of level of creativity.
It really is. I love that you said pieces fit together. Like so many things are coming into my mind right now. And I grabbed these images before we started because I was like, I feel like we're gonna talk about this. And so I'm gonna just put an image up on the screen. So this is something that I've been working with a lot recently, and it's the idea of we as beings, we have both we have both an input and an output, right, in every area of our lives. So just taking this one for a second, we are physical beings, right? So I'm going to use physical down here. We're emotional, we're mental, and we're spiritual, right? We have all these areas where we show up in our lives that we have to show up physically, we receive physically. We show up mentally, we receive, right? So each one, it's not just like one piece of the puzzle where we're out in this side, we have the, I can't do this backwards. We have the outlet here, but there's no inlet, right? Like we have to both give and receive from our spiritual life, from our physical life, from our emotional, from our mental. And oftentimes in a corporate space, this is how we're expected to show up, right? Actually, let me flip it like this. We're expected to show up physically and we're expected to show up mentally. But are we receiving physically anything, right? Like, are we sitting at a desk all day long and tied to that desk? Not physically, but like, is it really giving to our bodies? Are we able to receive in our bodies if we're sitting at that desk all day long, or staring at a screen, or whatever? And same thing with mentally, we're showing up and we're giving mentally, giving, right? But a lot of times in a more corporate space, we're expected to not show up at all spiritually or emotionally, right? Like these are like, there's a line divided that says that's for home life, right? You leave that to your personal world. And what happens is we end up draining our energy. And this is what burnout looks like, right? Like we're using these areas where we're really like, right? We're like stoking the fire in those areas, but everything else is getting drained. And then that's when we hit burnout. And that's when we hit exhaustion. And so it's like, wait a minute, we are physical beings in all of these areas. So a lot of people will then lean into, okay, well, this is where I feel whole again, in my spiritual practice, in my creative practice, in my emotions. Maybe it's something that I've learned to do to help myself, and now I want to empower that and move into entrepreneurship and empower that for others. But then if all you know from your business life is to go back into that grind to make it work, right? Now you're empowered, you're passionate, you're saying like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get out there, I'm going to help people so that they can experience what I experience. And what do? You smack yourself right back into that same place.
Yeah, very, very much. And it reminds me, going back to what we were talking about before, I think this brings it back to the community idea. Not
Yes.
just for me, I feel like you want to cultivate multiple communities, different types of communities for different things,
Yes.
you know? It's very rare that one community can serve all purposes. So I think realizing that and having places where you can let down your guard,
Hmm.
that's a really important one, um, I think, for entrepreneurs. Because when you're pitching to get investors, or when you're trying to get clients, or you're networking for business, you sort of want to always seem like you're presenting in a certain way.
Right.
Whatever way that is, you want to show up in a certain way. But I think for entrepreneurs especially, we need those spaces where we don't where we can just show up as close to naturally, or I hesitate to use the word authentic because I feel like there's different ways of being authentic. I almost want to just say Like you can drop your guard a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know,
You
you
could
can
show up in that messy middle of the process where,
exactly.
yeah.
It's like, hey,
And
I want help with X, or I'm having trouble with X, or whatever. To feel that it's okay to ask and receive. That's the
yes,
kind of community I think you really want. One type of community you really want to find. Um,
absolutely. And yeah, I think that it's so true, right? Like the word that was coming up when you were saying like pitching to investors and things like that, you want to show up as confident, right? Like that's not the space where you walk in and you're like, I've got this amazing idea, right? And I'm also working some stuff out still. And no, of course, right? Because you're asking for something from someone. And in that case, you're probably asking for money or you're asking for some support in some way to help you grow this thing. So that's not the same space where you go to work out like the logistical details that you're still kind of unsure of, right? You go to your community for that. And this is what I was saying before when it's like, does it have to be I can't remember the word that you said. A, it's like give or take, right? Like it's
Mhm.
I don't know, the word isn't coming through to me, but like um it's a trade-off. That's the word. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be a trade-off, right? But it doesn't exist in the same way. So for me, one of the things that I found over and over and over and over in every single kind of more formalized, let's call it the sphere of work for someone else, whether it was academia or corporate space, I always had a community of go to people. Most of the time, those people were somewhat connected to what I did, but they weren't necessarily my team, right?
Mhm.
So I would set up these meetings. This was something that I was like, I did it in every space I went into, and I got questioned about it every single time by whoever was my supervisor because they would say, you spend a lot of time having meetings with people who are not on the same projects as you. And I would say that's because they are hugely benefiting the work that I'm doing because they're giving me a different perspective, right? Or I would have these connections in, I was always the person that would be like, my team would come to me and they'd be like, do you know anybody in IT? Do you know anybody in marketing? Do you know anybody in, whatever team? Because I would say, yes, this person, I've connected with this person and we share resources and we support each other and we share information, which was like, there's a lot of time in like corporate spaces where it's like, you don't share information, you
Mhm.
hoard information
Yeah.
because this is like our,
Mm.
whatever. And I'm not saying you go and share proprietary information like it's candy, but you need to have a flow of communication. And so what I've done now in my own business, and this is what I think you're getting at to some extent, is like cultivate that team, that community for yourself, right? And I have done it through this podcast, honestly, this podcast of like connecting with people who were working in similar realms, but in different ways. So if I have a question or I need somebody, and I'm not saying this is always free, right? Like I will hire the people in my community like that, like no
Yeah.
problem, right? Oh, I know somebody who's an expert in marketing. I'm going
Mhm.
to go find Nicole and I'm going to hire her to help me, right? And there
Mhm.
may be other people too that like are a little bit closer into your circle that you do kind of bounce off free advice or and there's different levels of it, right? So you just go into that consciously and compassionately.
I think that's, your in-house experience sounds a lot like mine was. I remember I had a manager who's one of the reasons why I left corporate life.
Hmm.
She said something to me basically to the effect of that I should just concentrate on design. Just basically stay in my lane.
Ugh, like
Don't have any,
just hurts
right?
to hear that.
Just
Yes.
stay, just focus on design. Don't look at anything else because I was doing a lot of different things. I had done a collaboration with the copy department to come up with a new process. I
Hmm.
had done something with the tech department to do these tech talks for things that would help the other designer. Like I was doing this sort of cross pollination.
Hmm.
Um, and I wasn't even conscious that it was a thing. It was just to your language, like my way of being. My way
Yeah.
of being is let's collaborate, let's cross pollinate.
Yes.
And when she said that, I knew, like in my head, I was like, this is no longer the place for me. This is not where I'm going to grow. They're never going to appreciate what I'm bringing to the table here.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a shame because that's where innovation happens. That's where creativity happens.
Yes.
That's where people talk about corporate culture when you're bonding with each other and learning about each other and working together well. That's where the magic is. So
I 1,000,000% agree with that. And I'm not saying that all corporate spaces are bad, right? But
yeah,
there
no,
are
not at
a
all.
lot of experiences that are happening like this and have happened like that. And I mean, it happens in other spaces too. Like, actually, it makes me think of so before my corporate life, I was an art teacher. And I worked in schools that were, I'm just going to throw out some educational terms here for a second, but constructivism or EL, which is expeditionary experiential learning. Wow, I can't even use
Mhm.
words today, but they were all these very these curriculums, these educational theories that were focused on interdisciplinary kinds of spaces, right?
Mhm.
And I found it fascinating that so many times, even in these schools that were really focused on the interdisciplinary, the arts were left out of that, right?
Mhm.
Oh, well, we'll combine math and science. Oh, we'll combine, reading and,
History and
whatever.
literature are always,
Yes.
like what
Yeah.
seems natural fit to
Oh,
them. Right?
absolutely. Right. But I
The,
was like,
the artists are like the weirdos that get put in a corner.
yeah, or like, oh, that's just fun time, right? That's just fun
Right.
time. So I worked in this school, which was, it was an EL school, and it was all about creating these experiences and learning through experiences. And I tried, like, I remember being like, okay, I'm going to go to this teacher and see how we can combine things. And I kept getting like pushed out. And some of them would be like, okay, sure, we'll do one project with you, or, something like that. And I was like, this is not the the whole reason like of being for
Mhm.
this school. So finally I was like, fine, I know everyone's curriculum because that was my job to know what every single class was doing and every single grade. And I'll just design projects that are focused on what they're learning in the classroom to enhance and enrich them. And so I did. And so the kids would come in, we would do the projects, they would, they would be like, oh, this is what we're doing in math and this is how it ties in. And like the kids got it. So it was time for like an open house. And I remember going to the classroom teachers, and saying, like, can I put my work, not my work, but the kids' work in your classroom? Because the parents don't come to the art room, right? They want to see what they're doing in their core subjects, even in
Mhm.
this school that's all about interdisciplinary, right? And I remember going to the eighth grade math teacher, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna bring these actually she did like sixth through eighth, I think. So I brought in the projects and I set them down, and I was like, would you mind, I'll hang them in your room. I just like, can I put these in your room? Because they're not going to come here. And she started looking through them and she was like, oh my goodness, this is so cool. What you're doing in art actually, like, it ties into what we're doing in the classroom. And I was like, I know. And she's like, no, 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 it's really cool. Like, you're doing Renaissance, and that's actually what they're doing here. And you're using like graphs and like I had done these grid projects with Renaissance art. And she's like, they're doing that in science and they're doing that. And I was like, I know. And I remember being so frustrated where I was like, this is what I'm here to do, right? And yet I kept getting like, oh no, it's not important. You don't know what you're, just stick to art, right? Just
Yeah.
teach the kids how to draw. Just, play with colors and play. And I was just like, so frustrated. And after that, she was like, oh, wait, our curriculum? And I was like, of course I know your curriculum. It is my job to know everything that everyone's doing in the school and tie it all together. And that is the actual like theory that this entire school is built off of. I'm probably the most accurate, like the most skilled at this, and no one wants to work with me, right? So that's when I left that school. But anyway, that's like a long story to illustrate. I feel like that happens so often that Same thing happened in corporate where it's like, I want this innovation, right? I want innovation. I want innovation. I want innovation. So I show up and say, here's innovation. Oh, that's weird. That's too far out there, right?
Yeah, I mean, extrapolating it out, like we're talking about sort of this long-standing idea of art as separate from like other disciplines, but you can really um, generalize it out, right, across anything. If anyone has had an experience where they have an idea or they want to be on a project, or for example, we were doing some branding work when I was in house, and we had an outside agency do this big rebrand. And I understood why they did the original big rebrand, but then there were opportunities to do some other types of rebrands. And I was very quick to advocate for changing up our whole workflow. Like changing up, like in other words, like let's take these low-level projects. Why is everything flipped? Why are we, why don't we, I said, I want to, let's rebrand, let's pitch new ideas before the ideas are getting stale. Like before the current
Yeah.
brand starts to get stale, let's start working on this early and show what we can do internally you know and I think that it was as though I was asking to set fire to the house or something like that. Like, it
It
was
was
just so,
uncomfortable, right?
right, it's so radical. Like, what is she saying? We can't do this art, we've always done it XYZ way.
Yes.
um
Ugh, that phrase, we've always done it this way. It makes my like whole like my
like
head wants to explode. Like you tell me you want innovation, which is the antithesis of we've always done it this way. And when presented with innovation, the first thing you say is, but this is how we've always done it. Where what are we not speaking the same language on here, right?
because it's risk, right? It's risk, it's
Yeah.
change, it's risk. And I think I think a lot of us even have that same voice internally.
Hmm.
Oh no, as soon as you're doing something different that's really could shake stuff up, there's this voice that's like, uh-oh, pull back, don't do that.
Yep.
And you know sometimes that voice has merit. There are certain situations when it's good to listen to that voice a little bit, but other times it's just a feeling. It's just a feeling of discomfort. It's just a feeling like of what if this bombs? And it's like, yeah, what if it bombs? Then it bombs. Let's do it. Let's
Yeah.
try and see.
And I think that's where it's so important to understand your soul wisdom language, right? Like, this is like, whew, beautiful, like bringing it back into this conversation because when you know your ways of knowing, right, how you receive information and your ways of being, how you express that information, and what ways are natural to you, right? Like, that, I think, is that word authentic, is this is the natural state of being for you or the natural state of knowing. When you can speak that language, then you know the difference between risk and danger.
And I think, I love this idea of it's really like of being so in touch with yourself that you know your soul language. Because I think it equally applies to like being in house in a job, right?
Hmm.
It makes it easier when you're in touch with that. It makes it easier to identify, is this the right opportunity for me? Is this the right role?
Yeah.
Um, who's a good potential collaborator on a project for me? Who can I reach out and have these conversations with, or work with across departments? Who will be a champion for me when I want to bring innovation into my company,
Yeah.
right? So I think this idea of soul wisdom and soul language works equally well, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're in the corporate setting.
Yes.
It's really about um, that knowing, giving, and receiving, and
Absolutely.
what's going to build up. And
And this is why I say, like, it will change. And I don't even want to say change. This is what will evolve the corporate space. However, I do believe that we're doing it first in the entrepreneurial space because we have the authority to do that, right? Whereas to make that big shift in a corporate space, it disrupts everything, right? Like I said, whole environment that is there to support, like the ecosystem. I like to use this word ecosystem, right? The ecosystem of corporate space, and you can sub in nonprofit, you can sub in academia, you can sub in whatever, right? The sphere of a company, a business that is probably than like 10 people. That space is there to support the life force of whatever the gift of that company is, right? So whatever that company is producing, whether it's a service, whether it's an item, whether it's a product, right? But as an entrepreneur, that life force is you. And so everything in your ecosystem has to support you, your ways of knowing, your ways of being. And traditional marketing will tell you, right? The training that I've had in a more traditional marketing space is find out what your clients need. Find out what, who is your niche audience and what do they need and how do they need it. But the problem that I have with that is that that is putting their needs before yours, which in a corporate space makes sense because you already know this is what I'm here to do, right? That's established in creating the business. And so then you're finding the clients that meet that and then making fine tune, refining that within the business. But it's not a life that you're altering, right? It's a system that you're altering. But if you're doing that as an entrepreneur, right? If you actually find out what is it that I do, what is it that I need, and how do I do that in the most authentic way, then you broadcast that out through your marketing and your branding and your messaging and all of the things, right? Whether it's visual or written or just the way you are showing up, then those people can find you and come to you. And I think that's a big difference, right? Because you're central to your business rather than you being a part, like one cog in a wheel.
You really hit on something with how the traditional marketing uh, is conceptualized in house, right? Versus when you're an entrepreneur. Um, I think I run into this with a lot of entrepreneurs. They're like very frustrated. Oh, I can't find my niche, and I'm being told this, and I'm being told that,
Mm.
and it's because you have to do that inner work first. You have to do the
Yes.
inner work in terms of who you are and what you can bring and what you're doing. And you also, for you as a person or as the entrepreneur, the business leader, and you also have to do a level of what's the business. There's actually two levels there. Sometimes they're the same or really close, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes there's a little bit of a difference, right? Even though I'm a solopreneur right now, I consider this business, Maven, as more of a separate entity than my previous business
Mm.
because I've grown it in such a way and defined it in such a way to be so.
Yeah.
And
It's an
and
entity you're in relationship with, right? So, like, if you look at relationships and you look at a partnership, right? If I'm in partnership with an intimate person, like my partner, my life partner, right? She's a whole person all in and of herself, right? And I'm a whole
Mhm.
person all in and of myself. And there was a time I think that we were told or taught through just kind of like the language that was used collectively that you find the person that completes you, right? Like, oh, this person, I feel whole when I'm with this person. But really, it kind of brings it back to this image, right? Like you're looking for the person that fits well with you. And that's the same with your customers. It's the same with your collaborators, right? Like you know your piece of the puzzle and then you find what fits with you. So your business is an entity of itself and you are in relationship with it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I love this.
I know, like this is so great. We could talk about this forever. Um, so I think that's the important work that we're doing, right? And we're all doing it in different ways, and we're bringing in our specialty. So you're bringing in your specialty of being that knowing marketing, right, is all parts of your business and all parts of your being, and you get to shine those parts of you that were maybe a little bit dampened in that corporate space, but now you're able to do it in a way that is authentic, right? That's genuine to who you are and how you show up. And me, like, I love working with people who are kind of in that transitional phase and finding what I like to call work-life harmony, or that sustainable ecosystem. So we get to do this together, but individually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. Oh my goodness. So time flies when you're having fun. Um, and I definitely have fun chatting with you, Nicole. So we're coming to the end of our conversation, but this is not the last conversation we will have for sure. I feel very confident that we'll show up again in many ways together. So before we go, any parting words that you want to share, just kind of any wisdom from your own experience that you want to drop in for people who are here today?
Um, I think to just not to be afraid, or I mean, of course, it's natural to be afraid, but not to let fear control the decision or the conversation you're having with yourself.
Yeah.
Um, and nothing is permanent. If something's not working for you, change it. It's okay. It's not, maybe you've outgrown whatever that thing was, you know, and that's okay.
I love it.
So, yeah.
Beautiful. And that's the sitting in the discomfort, I think, that you were talking about, right? Like getting comfortable with being uncomfortable doesn't mean that you have to like take huge leaps and go and put yourself out there in ways that are like frightening, right? Like if you're in that like frozen state of fear, that's not discomfort, that's a frozen state of fear, right? So know the difference and push yourself a little bit outside of that comfort zone, because that's actually where true learning happens and that's where growth happens.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Nicole, tell us how people can connect with you and receive your magic.
Well, you can connect with me on social at Hello Maven. Um, and you can find me at hellomaven.com. I offer a free strategy session if you want to talk or brainstorm ideas. The link is on my site.
Beautiful. So I'm going to drop those links in. It's been a joy having you here on the show today. And for anyone watching, if we're just meeting each other, definitely connect and come play in these spaces with us. And we'll talk again soon. So we'll be back next week with another episode of the Soul Wisdom Exchange. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Regina. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.